The morning sun cast long shadows across the schoolyard as students gathered in small groups, their voices mixing with the sound of birds chirping in nearby trees. Among them stood Marcus Chen, a quiet 12-year-old boy with messy black hair and glasses that constantly slid down his nose. He clutched his worn backpack tightly, trying to make himself invisible as he always did. Marcus had transferred to Riverside Middle School 3 weeks ago, and in that short time he had mastered the art of disappearing into the background. He sat in the back corner of every classroom, ate lunch alone under the oak tree by the library, and walked home quickly with his eyes fixed on the sidewalk. His mother worried about him constantly, but Marcus insisted he was fine. The truth was far more complicated. At his old school across town, Marcus had been different. He had friends, he laughed freely, and he wasn't afraid to raise his hand in class. But everything changed after the incident at the talent show last year. He had volunteered to perform, excited to share something special with his classmates. When the moment came, his nerves got the better of him, and what should have been triumphant turned into disaster. The laughter that followed haunted him for months until his parents finally agreed to let him transfer schools for a fresh start. Now, at Riverside, Marcus walked through the halls like a ghost. His teachers barely noticed him, which was exactly how he wanted it. He turned in his assignments on time, scored well on tests, and never caused trouble. In return, he hoped the world would forget he existed. The school building was old but beautiful, with high ceilings and large windows that let natural light flood the corridors. In the center of the main building stood the auditorium, a grand space with red velvet seats and a stage that had witnessed decades of performances, assemblies, and ceremonies. Marcus avoided that hallway whenever possible. Just seeing the auditorium doors made his stomach twist with anxiety, but he couldn't avoid them today. His locker was being repaired and he had to use a temporary one near the auditorium. As he approached, he heard voices echoing from inside. The doors were propped open and curiosity got the better of him. He peeked inside. On stage stood 3 students, clearly the popular crowd. There was Brandon Mitchell, star of the basketball team, with his confident swagger and bright smile. Next to him was Sarah Parker, who seemed to float rather than walk, her designer clothes always perfect. The third was Jason Lee, whose family owned half the businesses in town and who never let anyone forget it. They were talking loudly, their voices carrying across the empty seats. Marcus couldn't help but overhear their conversation. They were discussing the upcoming spring showcase, an annual event where students performed various talents for parents and the community. It was apparently the biggest event of the year at Riverside. Brandon was juggling a basketball between his hands as he spoke. He mentioned doing a basketball trick routine set to music. Sarah wanted to perform a modern dance she had been working on with a professional choreographer. Jason, however, seemed bored with the whole discussion. Then Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. Jason pointed to the grand piano sitting at the edge of the stage, covered with a protective cloth. The piano had been donated to the school 20 years ago by a wealthy family, and it was supposed to be magnificent, though Marcus had never heard anyone play it. Jason made a bold declaration that rang through the auditorium. He said that anyone who thought they were special at this school was fooling themselves. He said real talent was rare and most people were just pretending. Then he said something that would change everything. If anyone at this school could sit down at that piano right now and actually play something impressive, something that gave him goosebumps, he would kneel right there on the stage and apologize for every arrogant thing he had ever said. But he was confident nobody could do it. The piano, he claimed, was just decoration because nobody at Riverside had real musical talent. Sarah and Brandon laughed, though Sarah's laugh seemed a bit uncomfortable. She suggested that maybe someone in the music classes could play. Jason dismissed this immediately. He said the music teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was fine for teaching basics, but nobody in her classes had the kind of skill he was talking about. He wanted to see someone play like the professionals, with passion and technique that would make people stop in their tracks. Marcus felt something stir inside him, something he had buried deep after his failure at the talent show. His fingers tingled, almost involuntarily curling as if reaching for keys that weren't there. He stepped back from the doorway quickly, his heart pounding. He hurried to his temporary locker, grabbed his books, and rushed to his first class. But throughout the entire day, he couldn't focus on anything the teachers said. His mind kept returning to Jason's challenge and that covered piano sitting on the stage. During lunch, sitting alone as usual under his oak tree, Marcus pulled out his phone. He scrolled through old photos until he found what he was looking for. There was a picture of him at age 7, sitting at a piano much larger than he was, his tiny hands stretched across the keys, a huge smile on his face. Next to him stood an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. That was his grandmother, the person who had taught him everything he knew about music. She had been a concert pianist in her youth, performing in halls across 3 continents. When arthritis ended her performing career, she poured all her knowledge and passion into teaching her grandson. From age 5 until she passed away 2 years ago, Marcus had spent every Saturday afternoon in her living room, learning not just how to play piano, but how to make it sing. His grandmother always told him that music wasn't about perfection or showing off. It was about truth, about expressing things that words couldn't capture. She said that when you played from your heart, you could touch other people's hearts too. Marcus had believed her completely, right up until the moment he froze on stage at his old school, his hands shaking too badly to play, while everyone watched and waited and eventually laughed. After that day, Marcus closed the lid on his grandmother's piano, which his parents had inherited. He hadn't touched it since. The instrument sat in their living room like a monument to his failure, a reminder of what he could have been if he had been braver. But now, sitting under the oak tree with the afternoon sun warming his face, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in over a year. It was a spark, small but persistent like the first star appearing in a twilight sky. Jason's arrogant challenge echoed in his mind. That piano on the stage was calling to him, and for the first time since his grandmother died, Marcus wondered if maybe, just maybe, it was time to answer. That evening, Marcus walked home slowly, taking the long route through the neighborhood. His mind was a battlefield where fear and longing fought for control. Every few steps he would shake his head, trying to dismiss the crazy idea that had taken root during lunch. But the idea was stubborn, growing stronger with each passing hour. When he finally reached his house, a modest 2-story home with blue shutters and a well-kept garden, his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and ginger filled the air. She looked up as he entered, her face brightening with the hopeful expression she always wore when he came home, searching for signs that today might have been the day he made a friend. Marcus mumbled a greeting and headed upstairs to his room, dropping his backpack by his desk. He sat on his bed and stared at the wall, but his mind was downstairs in the living room, where his grandmother's piano waited under its protective cover. His parents had asked him several times if they should sell it or move it to storage, but Marcus always said no. He couldn't explain why he wanted to keep something that hurt to look at, but the thought of it leaving the house felt wrong, like losing his grandmother all over again. Dinner was quiet, as it usually was on weeknights. His father, a software engineer who worked long hours, asked about school. Marcus gave his standard response: everything was fine, classes were okay, nothing special to report. His parents exchanged a glance, the kind of silent communication that happens between people who have been married for 15 years. They worried about him, he knew, but they also respected his need for space. After helping clear the dishes, Marcus retreated to his room and tried to focus on homework. Math problems blurred before his eyes. He kept thinking about Jason's challenge, the way the words had echoed through the empty auditorium. The arrogance in that voice had irritated him, but it was more than that. It was the dismissive way Jason had talked about talent, as if it was something only special people had, as if everyone else was just pretending. Marcus knew what real talent looked like because he had seen it in his grandmother. She could sit at a piano and transport you to another world. She could make you feel joy, sadness, nostalgia, hope, all without saying a single word. And she had told him many times that he had the same gift. But gifts meant nothing if you were too afraid to use them. Around 10 o'clock, when the house had settled into its nighttime quiet, Marcus made a decision. He crept downstairs in his socks, careful to avoid the third step that always creaked. The living room was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the large window. The piano sat against the wall, its cover draped over it like a shroud. Marcus approached slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. He reached out and pulled the cover away, revealing the beautiful mahogany instrument beneath. His grandmother had taken such pride in this piano, polishing it weekly, treating it like the treasure it was. Even after 2 years of silence, it looked perfect. He sat on the bench which his father had adjusted to the right height for him when he was younger. He would need to raise it now he had grown. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. This was the moment he had been avoiding. The moment of truth where he would discover if he had lost everything or if something remained. Slowly, carefully, he placed his fingers on the keys. They felt cool and smooth, familiar despite the long absence. He took a deep breath and began to play a simple scale, just C major up and down. The sound filled the quiet house, each note clear and true. The piano was slightly out of tune, but it still sang beautifully. Marcus stopped and listened to the silence that followed. No one came downstairs to check on the noise. His parents' bedroom was at the far end of the house, and they were probably already asleep. He was alone with the piano, just like all those Saturday afternoons with his grandmother. He started playing again, this time choosing one of the first pieces she had taught him, a simple melody by Mozart. His fingers were stiff at first, uncertain, but muscle memory was a powerful thing. Within a few measures, the movements began to feel natural again. He made mistakes, stumbled over passages that once had been effortless, but he kept going. As he played, something extraordinary happened. The fear that had been clenched in his chest like a fist began to loosen. The notes flowing from the piano seemed to carry away some of the weight he had been carrying. He wasn't on a stage being judged. He wasn't performing for anyone. He was just playing music in his living room at night, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. Marcus played for almost an hour, working through pieces from memory, some perfect, some rough, all meaningful. When he finally stopped, his fingers were tired but happy. He sat in the darkness, listening to the last notes fade away, and he knew something had changed. The fear was still there, living somewhere in his stomach, but it no longer owned him completely. The next morning at school, Marcus found himself walking past the auditorium intentionally instead of avoiding it. The doors were closed and he couldn't see inside, but he knew the piano was there, waiting under its cover. The question that consumed him now was simple but terrifying. Could he actually do what he was considering? Could he face Jason's challenge? During his lunch period, instead of heading to his usual spot under the oak tree, Marcus went to the library. He found a computer in a quiet corner and started researching. He looked up the schedule for the auditorium, when it was being used for classes or rehearsals, when it sat empty. He discovered that every day from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, the auditorium was unoccupied. That would be his window. The school day dragged on with agonizing slowness. Marcus barely heard anything his teacher said. In English class, he was supposed to be reading a chapter of their assigned novel, but he kept reading the same paragraph over and over, without absorbing a single word. His mind was already at 3 o'clock, already walking through those auditorium doors. When the final bell rang at 2:45, Marcus felt his stomach flip. He had 15 minutes before his window opened. He walked slowly to his locker, got his things, and then made his way toward the auditorium. Other students rushed past him, eager to get home or to their after-school activities. But Marcus moved against the current, heading deeper into the school. The hallway near the auditorium was empty when he arrived. He checked his phone. 3 o'clock exactly. His hand reached for the door handle, then pulled back. What was he doing? This was crazy. He should go home, practice more, wait until he was ready. But when would he be ready? Would he ever be ready? Marcus thought about his grandmother, about the way she smiled when she played, the pure joy in her eyes. She had never been afraid of the piano, never worried about making mistakes. She had told him once that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was playing the music even when your hands were shaking. He pulled open the door and stepped inside. The auditorium was dim. The afternoon sun filtered through high windows. It smelled faintly of wood polish and old fabric. Marcus walked down the aisle between the seats, his footsteps echoing softly. The stage loomed ahead, larger and more intimidating than it had seemed when he peeked in yesterday. He climbed the steps at the side of the stage, his legs feeling weak. The piano sat there, covered and silent, exactly where it had been. Marcus approached it slowly, reverently. He lifted the cover and folded it carefully, setting it aside. The piano was beautiful, clearly expensive, with gleaming black lacquer and ivory keys that looked pristine. He sat on the bench and adjusted it to the right height. He lifted the fallboard to expose the keys. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface, a nervous boy with uncertain eyes. He raised his hands and positioned them over the keys, and in that moment, Marcus Chen made a choice. He chose to be brave. He chose to honor his grandmother's memory. He chose to let the music speak for him when his voice had failed. He began to play. The first notes rang out clear and strong, filling the empty auditorium with sound. Marcus had chosen Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of his grandmother's favorites. She used to say this piece was like moonlight turned into music, gentle but powerful, simple but profound. His fingers found the melody easily, as if they remembered the path even when his mind had tried to forget. As he played, something magical happened. The fear that had gripped him melted away, replaced by something purer. He wasn't thinking about Jason's challenge anymore, or about the talent show disaster, or about being the invisible boy at Riverside Middle School. He was just feeling the music, letting it flow through him the way his grandmother had taught him. The auditorium's acoustics were magnificent. Every note resonated perfectly, sustained and clear. Marcus closed his eyes, letting his hands move across the keys with increasing confidence. The piece built slowly, the left hand maintaining a steady rhythm while the right hand sang out the melody, sweet and melancholic. He didn't hear the auditorium door open. He didn't notice Mrs. Rodriguez, the music teacher, step inside and freeze in the doorway. She had been walking past on her way to the parking lot when she heard the music and couldn't believe her ears. She moved quietly down the aisle and took a seat near the back, not wanting to disturb whoever was playing. Marcus continued, lost in the music now. His grandmother had always told him that when you played from the heart, time disappeared. She was right. He had no idea how long he had been playing when he finally reached the ending, those last gentle notes that faded away like a whisper in the darkness. He held his hands over the keys for a moment, letting the silence settle, then slowly opened his eyes. That's when he heard the applause. His heart nearly stopped. He spun around on the bench to see Mrs. Rodriguez standing at the edge of the stage, clapping with tears streaming down her face. Marcus felt panic rise in his throat. He had been discovered. Mrs. Rodriguez was in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes behind rectangular glasses. She taught all the music classes at Riverside and directed the small school orchestra. She wiped her eyes and smiled at Marcus. She told him that was the most beautiful thing she had heard in all her years at this school. She asked him who he was because she didn't recognize him as one of her students. Marcus stammered out his name, explaining that he was new and didn't take music classes. His voice sounded small and frightened in the large space. Mrs. Rodriguez climbed the steps to the stage and approached the piano. She asked Marcus where he learned to play like that. The question opened a floodgate. Marcus found himself telling her about his grandmother, about the Saturday afternoon lessons, about how music had once been his whole world. He told her about the talent show disaster, though he couldn't bring himself to go into details, and how he hadn't played seriously since. The teacher listened with complete attention, nodding at the right moments, her expression full of understanding. When Marcus finished his story, she sat down on the stage next to the piano bench and told him something he needed to hear. She said that real talent wasn't about never making mistakes or never feeling afraid. Every great musician had experienced failures and doubts. What separated true artists from everyone else was that they played anyway. They honored their gift by using it, even when it was scary, even when it was hard. She told him his grandmother would be proud of him for playing today, in this empty auditorium, taking this small brave step. Then Mrs. Rodriguez made an unexpected offer. The spring showcase was 3 weeks away. She would love for Marcus to perform in it. He could choose any piece he wanted, take as much time as he needed to prepare. She would help him practice, give him access to the auditorium piano whenever he wanted. All he had to do was say yes. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Perform in front of the whole school? In front of parents and the community? After what happened last time? The idea terrified him. He started to shake his head to make excuses, but Mrs. Rodriguez held up her hand. She told him he didn't have to decide right now. She wanted him to think about it. She also told him something interesting. The piano he had just played was special. It had been donated by the Chen family, a wealthy family in the area who had a daughter that died in a car accident 20 years ago. The girl, Lisa Chen, had been a talented pianist, and her parents donated this piano to the school in her memory. The plaque on the side of the piano had her name on it. Marcus felt chills run down his spine. Chen was his last name too, though as far as he knew, he wasn't related to this family. Still, something about the connection felt meaningful, as if the universe was sending him a message. Mrs. Rodriguez gave him her phone number and email address. She told him the auditorium would be open for practice every day from 3 to 4, and if he wanted to come earlier or stay later, she would arrange it. Then she left, giving him one last encouraging smile before disappearing through the auditorium doors. Marcus sat alone on the stage for a long time after she left. The piano seemed to glow in the afternoon light coming through the windows. He ran his fingers along the smooth edge, feeling the cool lacquer. Then he noticed the small brass plaque Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned, mounted on the side of the piano. It read, "In loving memory of Lisa Chen, whose music touched every heart she encountered. May her song continue through others." Something about those words hit Marcus hard. His grandmother had touched hearts with her music. Was that not what he wanted to? To honor her memory, to make the gift she had given him mean something? He thought about Jason's challenge again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't about proving something to an arrogant boy. It was about proving something to himself. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself returning to the auditorium every afternoon at 3 o'clock. He would practice for the full hour, sometimes working on technical exercises, sometimes just playing pieces he loved. Each day, his confidence grew a little stronger. His fingers remembered more, moved more easily. The rust was falling away, revealing the musician he had been before fear took over. On the 4th day, he wasn't alone. Mrs. Rodriguez came in halfway through his practice session, bringing sheet music she thought he might like. She sat and listened, offering gentle suggestions about interpretation and technique. She had a way of teaching that reminded Marcus of his grandmother, encouraging rather than critical, focused on the emotion behind the music rather than just hitting the right notes. On the 6th day, something unexpected happened. Marcus was deep into a Beethoven sonata when he heard a sound from the auditorium. He stopped playing and looked out into the seats. There, about halfway back, sat a girl from his grade. He recognized her from his math class, though he didn't know her name. She had red hair and freckles and always sat near the front, asking intelligent questions. The girl stood up and called out an apology. She said she had been passing by and heard the music. She hoped it was okay that she listened. Her name was Emma, and she played violin. She said what he was playing was beautiful, and asked if he was going to perform at the spring showcase. Marcus felt his face flush. He admitted he was thinking about it, but hadn't decided yet. Emma told him he should definitely do it. The showcase needed someone like him, someone who played with real feeling. Then she asked if maybe they could play something together sometime. She had been looking for a pianist to collaborate with on a duet. Before Marcus could respond, Emma apologized for interrupting his practice and left quickly. But her words stayed with him long after she was gone. Someone had heard him play and wanted to make music with him. The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. That night at dinner, Marcus surprised his parents by asking if they remembered where his grandmother's old sheet music was stored. His mother dropped her fork and his father looked up with wide eyes. They told him it was all in boxes in the attic, carefully preserved. His mother's voice shook when she asked if he was playing again. Marcus nodded, and suddenly his mother was crying, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. She told him she had hoped and prayed for this day. His father cleared his throat, clearly emotional, and asked if Marcus would play something for them after dinner. Marcus agreed, his own eyes stinging with tears he hadn't expected. That evening, Marcus sat at his grandmother's piano with his parents on the couch behind him. His hands trembled as he placed them on the keys, but this time, the trembling came from emotion rather than fear. He played the same Chopin nocturne he had played in the auditorium, pouring everything into it. All the grief he had carried since his grandmother died, all the loneliness of the past year, all the hope that was starting to bloom inside him again. When he finished, the living room was silent except for the sound of his mother softly crying. His father got up and hugged him tightly, something he rarely did. They told him how proud they were, how proud his grandmother would be. That night, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He was starting to believe in himself again. The next day at school, Marcus noticed Emma watching him in math class. She smiled when their eyes met, and during the passing period, she caught up with him in the hallway. She asked again about the duet idea, and this time Marcus found the courage to say yes. They agreed to meet after school the next day to discuss what piece they might play together. Word began to spread in quiet ways. Emma must have mentioned Marcus to her friends because suddenly a few students he had never spoken to were saying hello in the hallways. Mrs. Rodriguez told a few of her music students about the talented pianist who practiced in the auditorium every day. The invisible boy was becoming visible, though Marcus didn't fully realize it yet. He continued his daily practice sessions, working through pieces his grandmother had taught him and exploring new ones. Mrs. Rodriguez brought him more challenging sheet music, pieces by Rachmaninoff and Liszt that pushed his technical abilities. The work was hard but exhilarating. He had forgotten how much he loved the challenge of mastering something difficult. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after he had first played in the auditorium, Marcus was working through a particularly tricky passage when he heard voices. He stopped playing and looked toward the entrance. 3 figures stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright hallway lights. As they walked down the aisle, Marcus recognized them immediately. Brandon, Sarah, and Jason. His stomach dropped. He stood up from the piano bench instinctively, ready to flee. But something made him stay. Maybe it was the 2 weeks of practice that had rebuilt his confidence. Maybe it was remembering his grandmother's words about courage. Whatever it was, Marcus stood his ground. Jason reached the stage first, followed by the other 2. His expression was unreadable. Brandon looked curious, and Sarah seemed almost nervous. Jason looked up at Marcus and asked if he was the one who had been playing. Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned during announcements that someone was using the auditorium piano, and Jason had heard from Emma that there was someone really talented practicing every day. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. His heart pounded so hard he was sure they could hear it. Jason climbed the steps to the stage, and Marcus fought the urge to back away. But Jason didn't approach aggressively. Instead, he walked to the piano and looked at it, then at Marcus. Jason reminded Marcus of the challenge he had made, the one about kneeling if someone could really play. He said he had heard that Marcus was good, but he wanted to judge for himself. He asked if Marcus would play something right now, with the 3 of them listening. If Marcus could genuinely give him goosebumps, Jason would keep his word. Marcus felt frozen. This was the moment he had been both wanting and dreading. But then he thought about something his grandmother used to say. She told him that music was a gift you gave to others, not a weapon you used against them. If he played now, he should play to share something beautiful, not to prove someone wrong. Marcus sat back down at the piano bench. His hands were shaking, but he placed them on the keys anyway. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about his grandmother, about all the hours they had spent together making music. Then he began to play. He chose Clair de Lune by Debussy, a piece his grandmother had called painting with sound. It started quietly, almost hesitantly, the notes floating through the air like moonlight on water. Marcus forgot about his audience. He forgot about Jason's challenge. He let himself sink into the music, feeling each phrase, shaping each melody with care and emotion. The piece built gradually, becoming more passionate, more intense, before settling back into quiet beauty. Marcus's fingers danced across the keys, his whole body swaying slightly with the rhythm. He was completely absorbed, living inside the music the way his grandmother had taught him to do. As he played the final soft notes and let them fade into silence, Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Jason, expecting to see mockery or dismissal. Instead, he saw something he never expected. Jason's face was flushed, his eyes were bright, and he was completely still. Sarah had her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. Brandon was staring at the piano as if he had never seen one before. The silence in the auditorium stretched out, thick with emotion. Then Jason did something that would become legendary at Riverside Middle School. Slowly, deliberately, he got down on his knees right there on the stage. He stayed there for a long moment, then looked up at Marcus with genuine respect in his eyes. Jason admitted he had been wrong.
He said he had never heard anything like that in his life.
He had goosebumps, actual goosebumps, and he felt things he didn't even have words for. He apologized for being arrogant, for dismissing real talent when he saw it. He asked Marcus to forgive him for ever doubting that someone at their school could be that gifted. Brandon and Sarah both started talking at once. Brandon said that was the most amazing thing he had ever witnessed. Sarah wiped her eyes and said Marcus had to perform at the spring showcase. Everyone needed to hear him play. They asked him questions, wanted to know where he learned, how long he had been playing, why they had never seen him before. Marcus found himself actually talking to them, telling them about his grandmother, about his love for music. They listened with genuine interest, no hint of the superiority or judgment he had expected. These were just kids who had been moved by something beautiful, and they wanted to understand it. When the three of them finally left, promising to tell everyone about the incredible pianist at Riverside, Marcus sat alone on the stage in stunned silence. Something extraordinary had just happened. He had faced his fear and played for an audience, even a small one, and it had gone well. Better than well. It had been transformative. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared from the back of the auditorium, where she had been quietly watching the whole encounter. She had tears streaming down her face. She climbed onto the stage and told Marcus that in 30 years of teaching, she had rarely witnessed a moment of such pure beauty and redemption. She asked him if he had made his decision about the spring showcase. Marcus looked at the piano, at the plaque with Lisa Chen's name on it, at his own hands that had just created something meaningful. He thought about his grandmother's spirit living on through his music. He thought about Emma waiting to play a duet with him. He thought about Jason on his knees, moved to humility by the power of art. And he knew what he had to do. He told Mrs. Rodriguez yes. He would perform at the spring showcase. The words came out steady and clear without hesitation. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled through her tears and hugged him tightly. She told him she would help him prepare, that they would make this performance something special, something unforgettable. As Marcus packed up his things to go home that afternoon, he felt different. The weight he had been carrying, the shame and fear that had defined him for so long, had lifted. He wasn't completely free of anxiety about performing in front of a large crowd, but he had proven to himself that he could do it. He had played with his heart open and vulnerable, and instead of being destroyed, he had been celebrated. He walked through the school hallways with his head up for the first time since he had arrived at Riverside. A few students he passed smiled at him, having already heard the rumors about the mysterious pianist who had humbled Jason Lee. Marcus smiled back, feeling the beginning of connections forming, friendships waiting to bloom. That night, he practiced at home for hours, working with renewed purpose. The spring showcase was only 1 week away. The week leading up to the spring showcase was the busiest and most intense of Marcus's life. Every afternoon he practiced in the auditorium for 2 hours instead of 1. Mrs. Rodriguez worked with him on stage presence, on how to walk out confidently, how to bow, how to handle the pressure of performing in front of hundreds of people. She was patient but demanding, pushing him to be better while never making him feel inadequate. Emma joined them twice to practice their duet. They had chosen a piece for violin and piano by Saint-Saëns, something both challenging and beautiful. Working with Emma was surprisingly easy. She understood music the way Marcus did, not just as notes on a page, but as a living, breathing thing. They would stop and discuss interpretation, debate tempo choices, laugh when they made mistakes, and celebrate when they got a passage perfect. Through Emma, Marcus began to meet other students. She introduced him to her friend group, a mix of kids from different social circles who all shared a love of arts and music. Marcus found himself eating lunch with them instead of alone under the oak tree. They asked him about his grandmother, about his musical training, about what other pieces he loved to play. For the first time in over a year, Marcus felt like he belonged somewhere. The story of Jason kneeling spread through the school like wildfire. It had been witnessed only by Brandon and Sarah, but they told their friends who told their friends until everyone knew. The narrative grew with each retelling. Some versions had Jason weeping openly. Others had Marcus playing for an hour straight without stopping. The truth was impressive enough, but myths were being built around that moment. Jason, to his credit, didn't deny the story or try to downplay it. He seemed genuinely changed by the experience. He sought Marcus out in the hallway 3 days before the showcase and asked if they could talk. Marcus agreed, nervous but curious. They sat on the steps outside the main building during lunch. Jason was quiet for a moment, then told Marcus something unexpected. His older sister had been a talented violinist who gave up music to focus on getting into a prestigious university. She got in, but Jason said she seemed miserable now, always stressed, never smiling the way she used to when she played. Watching Marcus play with such passion had reminded Jason of what his sister had lost. Jason admitted he had become arrogant because he was good at basketball and came from a wealthy family, but he realized those things didn't really matter. Watching Marcus make people feel something real through music showed him what true talent looked like. He asked if they could be friends or at least friendly. He wanted to learn from Marcus not about music necessarily, but about having the courage to care deeply about something. Marcus was touched by Jason's honesty. He agreed and they shook hands. As Jason walked away, Marcus realized that people were more complicated than he had thought. The arrogant boy who had made that challenge had depths Marcus hadn't seen, insecurities hidden behind confidence. Everyone was fighting their own battles. The night before the showcase, Marcus could barely sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind running through every piece he would perform. Mrs. Rodriguez had helped him choose 3 pieces for his solo performance, varied in style and difficulty, showcasing different aspects of his ability, plus the duet with Emma. It was ambitious, but she believed in him. His parents were almost as nervous as he was. His mother had taken the day off work to attend. His father had invited relatives, something Marcus discovered only that evening when his aunt and uncle called to say they were driving in from 2 hours away. The pressure was building, but surprisingly, Marcus felt ready. The fear was there, but it was manageable now, a companion rather than a captor. The morning of the showcase, Marcus woke early and practiced at home one final time. His fingers knew the music so well now that he could play while his mind wandered. He thought about his grandmother, wishing she could be there to see this. But in a way, she was there. She was in every note he played, in every technique she had taught him, in the confidence she had built in him over countless Saturday afternoons. The showcase was scheduled for 7 in the evening. Marcus arrived at school at 5, when Mrs. Rodriguez had arranged for him to have access to the auditorium for a final practice. The building was quiet. Most teachers had gone home, and the evening sun cast long shadows through the windows. Marcus made his way to the auditorium, his heart starting to race. The auditorium had been transformed. The stage was set with proper lighting, chairs arranged for the orchestra that would play later, and the piano positioned prominently at center stage. The red velvet seats stretched back into shadow, row after row waiting to be filled. Marcus stood in the aisle, taking it all in, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. She asked him how he was feeling. Marcus admitted he was terrified but also excited. She told him that was exactly right. The best performers always felt that mix of emotions. It meant he cared, and caring was what made performance meaningful. He practiced for 30 minutes, not running through entire pieces but focusing on specific passages that worried him, warming up his fingers, getting comfortable with the stage and the space. Then Mrs. Rodriguez made him stop. She said he was ready, and over-practicing now would only make him more nervous. She sent him home to rest, to eat a good dinner, to spend time with his family. She told him to arrive at 6:30, dressed nicely, ready to change the world. Marcus went home and found his mother had prepared all his favorite foods. She was trying not to cry and failing. His father kept checking the camera, making sure it had enough battery to record the performance. They ate together, talking about everything except the showcase, though it was all any of them could think about. At 6, Marcus put on the outfit they had chosen together. Black dress pants, a white button-down shirt, and a blue tie that had belonged to his grandfather. His mother helped him with the tie, her hands shaking slightly. She told him he looked so grown up, so handsome, so much like her own mother in the old photos from her concert days. Marcus hugged her tightly, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for his family, for their support, for never pushing him but always believing in him. They drove to the school together, arriving at 6:20. The parking lot was already filling up. The spring showcase was a big deal in the community, and many families attended even if their children weren't performing. Marcus felt his stomach clench as he saw the crowds gathering. Inside the school, the hallways buzzed with activity. Performers rushed back and forth, some in dance costumes, others carrying instruments, everyone looking nervous and excited. Mrs. Rodriguez spotted Marcus and hurried over. She looked elegant in a long black dress, her hair styled nicely. She told him the showcase would start promptly at 7. He was scheduled to perform fourth, after a dance number, a poetry reading, and a guitar solo. That gave him about 45 minutes to settle his nerves. Emma found him backstage looking beautiful in a dark green dress, her violin case in hand. She was nervous too, bouncing slightly on her toes. They went over the plan for their duet one more time, though they both knew it by heart. She told Marcus she was glad they were doing this together. Performing alone was scary, but having a partner made it better. Marcus agreed, grateful for her friendship and support. At 6:55, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered all the performers for a final pep talk. She told them this was their night to shine, to share their gifts with the community, to be proud of all the work they had put in. She reminded them that mistakes happen, and if they did, they should just keep going. The audience wanted to see them succeed, wanted to be moved and entertained. They should go out there with confidence and joy. The auditorium doors opened and the audience began filing in. Marcus peeked through the curtain at the side of the stage. The seats were filling rapidly. He spotted his parents sitting near the front with his aunt and uncle. He saw Emma's family, Jason with his parents and sister, Brandon and Sarah, many of his teachers, kids from school he knew by sight if not by name. The auditorium was packed, every seat taken, people standing in the back. Marcus felt panic rising. This was so much bigger than he had imagined. What if he froze like before? What if his hands shook too badly to play? What if he let everyone down? He started breathing too fast, feeling dizzy. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed immediately. She pulled him aside, took his hands in hers, and told him to look at her. She made him breathe slowly, in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, until his heart rate calmed. Then she told him something important. She said his grandmother was with him in every note he would play. She said the audience out there wanted to hear his music, wanted to be touched by his gift. She said he had already proven himself to the people who mattered most, himself included. This performance wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about sharing, about giving, about letting his music touch hearts the way Lisa Chen's music had touched hearts all those years ago. Marcus nodded, feeling the panic recede. Mrs. Rodriguez was right. He wasn't that scared boy from the talent show anymore. He had grown. At 7 o'clock sharp, the lights in the auditorium dimmed. The audience settled into their seats, their conversations fading to whispers and then to silence. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped onto the stage in a single spotlight, welcoming everyone to the annual spring showcase. She thanked the parents, teachers, and community members for supporting the arts program. Then she introduced the first performer, and the show began. Marcus watched from the wings as a group of dancers took the stage, moving in perfect synchronization to pop music. They were good, confident, their routine polished. The audience applauded enthusiastically when they finished. Next came a student who read 2 of her original poems, emotional pieces about family and belonging, that brought tears to some audience members' eyes. Then a boy performed a complex guitar piece, his fingers flying across the strings. Before Marcus knew it, Mrs. Rodriguez was back on stage introducing him. She told the audience about the special piano, Lisa Chen's piano, and how it had sat mostly silent for years until recently. She said they were fortunate tonight to hear it played by someone with remarkable talent and heart. She spoke about Marcus's dedication, his growth over the past weeks, and the gift he was about to share with them. Then she said his name, and the audience applauded as Marcus walked onto the stage. The spotlight was bright and hot. Marcus couldn't see the audience beyond the first few rows, which was both comforting and terrifying. He walked to the piano bench, his legs feeling shaky but holding. He sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and looked out at the sea of faces. He found his mother in the 3rd row, her hands clasped together, her face full of love and hope. He found Emma in the section reserved for performers, giving him a thumbs up. He found Jason, who nodded with respect and encouragement. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. He thought of his grandmother one more time, closed his eyes briefly, and began to play. His first piece was Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 16, a piece both technically demanding and emotionally rich. His fingers found the keys automatically, muscle memory taking over. The opening was bright and cheerful, filling the auditorium with cascading notes. Marcus felt his confidence grow with each measure. He wasn't shaking. His hands were steady. The piano responded beautifully to his touch, singing out clear and strong. As he played, something wonderful happened. The nervousness that had been coiled in his stomach released, replaced by pure joy. He was doing what he loved, what he was meant to do, and it felt incredible. He shaped each phrase with care, brought out the melody lines his grandmother had taught him to emphasize, let the music breathe and flow naturally. When he finished the first piece, the audience erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building. Marcus stood and bowed, his face flushed with excitement. He sat back down, waited for the applause to die down, and launched into his second piece without announcement. This was Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu, one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire, famous for its incredibly fast runs and complex rhythms. Marcus had worked tirelessly on this piece, and now all that practice paid off. His hands flew across the keys, the notes coming so quickly they almost blurred together, yet each one was distinct and clear. The piece was a showpiece designed to dazzle, and Marcus played it with technical brilliance. But he didn't sacrifice emotion for speed. The middle section, slower and more romantic, he played with tender feeling, bringing out the singing melody before returning to the virtuosic outer sections. When he finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, then the audience exploded. People were on their feet. Not all of them, but many, including his parents, including Jason and his family. The applause went on and on. Marcus stood and bowed again, feeling tears prick his eyes. He had done it. He had played in front of hundreds of people without freezing, without failing, but he wasn't finished. He sat down for his final solo piece, and this time he spoke into the microphone that had been set up beside the piano. His voice was quiet at first, but grew stronger as he explained that this last piece was dedicated to his grandmother, who had taught him everything he knew about music and about life. It was Debussy's Clair de Lune, he said, and it was her favorite. As he played, Marcus thought about all the Saturday afternoons, all the patient lessons, all the encouragement and love his grandmother had poured into him. He played for her, channeling his grief and his gratitude into every note. The piece was achingly beautiful, haunting and ethereal, and Marcus played it with such feeling that there was barely a dry eye in the auditorium by the time he finished. The silence that followed was profound. Then the applause began again, even louder than before, accompanied by some audience members wiping their eyes. Marcus bowed one final time and left the stage, his legs barely supporting him. Backstage, Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed him in a fierce hug, telling him that was extraordinary, that was perfect, that he had moved everyone out there to their cores. Emma appeared, her violin in hand, reminding him they still had their duet. Marcus had almost forgotten in the emotional aftermath of his solo pieces. They took a few minutes to collect themselves, then waited in the wings while two more performers went. Then it was their turn. Mrs. Rodriguez introduced their duet, explaining it was a piece by Saint-Saëns that required perfect synchronization between piano and violin. Emma and Marcus walked onto the stage together, and Marcus felt calmer with her there. They took their positions, made eye contact to establish tempo, and began. The duet was joyful and energetic, a conversation between two instruments, sometimes agreeing, sometimes playfully disagreeing, always interesting. Marcus and Emma had practiced this piece until they could anticipate each other's every move. They played as one, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. The audience watched, delighted as the two young musicians smiled at each other during particularly tricky passages, their enjoyment evident. When they finished, the applause was thunderous. Emma took Marcus's hand and they bowed together. As they left the stage, Emma was beaming, telling him that was the most fun she had ever had performing. Marcus agreed, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the hot stage lights. The rest of the showcase continued with more performances, all good, all worthy of applause. But Marcus knew, and sensed the audience knew, that something special had happened tonight. The whispers around him as he sat in the performer section confirmed it. People kept looking his way, pointing, talking about his performance. When the showcase ended and the audience filed out, Marcus was mobbed. Students he barely knew came up to congratulate him. Teachers shook his hand. Parents he had never met told him how moved they were. His own parents were crying openly, hugging him over and over, telling him how proud they were. His aunt kept saying she couldn't believe that was the same shy boy she had known all his life. Jason approached with his family. His sister, a college student with kind eyes, told Marcus his playing reminded her why she had loved music so much.
She said maybe it was time for her to pick up her violin again.
Jason's parents were effusive in their praise, asking about his training, his plans for the future. Jason just smiled and gave Marcus a fist bump, no words needed. Emma's parents invited Marcus and his family to dinner to celebrate, but Marcus's mother had already planned a celebration at home. They exchanged phone numbers and promised to get together soon. Emma hugged Marcus goodbye, telling him this was just the beginning for both of them. As the crowd thinned and people headed home, Mrs. Rodriguez found Marcus one last time. They stood on the empty stage, the lights being turned off one by one around them. She told him she had been teaching for 3 decades and had seen maybe 5 students with his level of natural talent. But more than talent, she said, he had heart. He played with his soul on display, vulnerable and honest, and that was what made him truly special. She told him about opportunities that existed for serious young musicians. There were summer programs at prestigious music schools, competitions that could open doors, scholarships and grants. If Marcus wanted to pursue music seriously, she would help him navigate that world. But she also said he should take his time deciding. He was only 12. He had years ahead to figure out his path. Marcus thanked her for everything, for believing in him, for pushing him, for being there when he needed someone. She hugged him and told him to go celebrate with his family. As Marcus walked out of the auditorium for the last time that night, he turned back to look at the stage, at the piano sitting there in the dim light. He felt different than when he had arrived. He felt like himself again, but also like someone new, someone brave. The weeks following the spring showcase brought changes that Marcus could never have imagined when he first walked through the doors of Riverside Middle School as the Invisible Boy. The video his father had recorded went viral within the school community, then spread beyond. Someone posted clips on social media, and suddenly Marcus was getting messages from people he had never met, telling him his playing moved them to tears or inspired them to pick up instruments they had abandoned. The local newspaper ran a feature story about him, complete with photos from the showcase and a long interview about his grandmother and his journey back to music. The headline read, "Young pianist honors grandmother's legacy with breathtaking performance." Marcus found it embarrassing, but his parents framed the article and hung it in the living room. At school, Marcus was no longer invisible. Students greeted him in the hallways. Teachers mentioned his performance in their classes as an example of dedication and excellence. The principal called him to her office not for trouble but to personally congratulate him and ask if he would be willing to play at future school events. But the most meaningful change was in Marcus himself. He walked differently now, with his head up and his shoulders back. He made eye contact with people. He spoke up in class when he had something to say. The fear that had controlled him for so long had loosened its grip. It was still there sometimes, especially late at night when his mind wandered to dark places, but it no longer defined him. His friendship with Emma blossomed into something precious. They ate lunch together every day with a growing group of friends who shared their love of music and arts. They practiced together twice a week, working on new duets and challenging each other to improve. Emma's passion for violin matched Marcus's passion for piano, and they pushed each other in the best possible ways. Jason surprised everyone, Marcus most of all, by becoming a genuine friend. He started hanging around the music hallway, listening when Marcus practiced, asking questions about technique and interpretation. He admitted he had always felt like something was missing in his life, and watching Marcus play had shown him what that was: passion, purpose, something that mattered beyond popularity and status. Jason even started taking guitar lessons from Mr. Hernandez, the school's guitar teacher. He was terrible at first, all thumbs and frustration, but he stuck with it. Marcus saw him practicing during lunch breaks, his tongue stuck out in concentration, working through simple chord progressions with the same determination he brought to basketball. It was humbling and inspiring to watch someone so naturally gifted at one thing struggle through the beginning stages of another. Brandon and Sarah also became part of Marcus's expanding circle. Brandon told stories that made everyone laugh, and Sarah had a kindness about her that drew people in. The 4 of them, along with Emma and her friends, formed a tight-knit group that crossed the usual social boundaries of middle school. They proved that friendship could form around shared respect and genuine connection, rather than just proximity or convenience. Marcus continued his daily practice sessions in the auditorium, but now he often had an audience. Students would wander in and sit in the back rows doing homework while listening to him play. Some days there would be just 1 or 2 people, other days a dozen or more. Marcus found he didn't mind. In fact, he liked sharing his music with anyone who wanted to hear it. Mrs. Rodriguez followed through on her promise to help Marcus explore opportunities in music. She connected him with a piano teacher at the nearby university, who offered to take Marcus on as a student at a reduced rate. Professor Chen, no relation despite the shared name, was a demanding teacher who pushed Marcus harder than anyone ever had. But she also opened his eyes to new possibilities in music, introducing him to contemporary composers and techniques his grandmother had never taught him. The summer programs Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned became a real possibility. She helped Marcus apply to several prestigious programs for young musicians. The applications required recorded auditions, essays, and recommendations. Marcus spent weeks preparing, recording, and re-recording pieces until they met his standards. Mrs. Rodriguez and Professor Chen both wrote glowing recommendations. One afternoon in late April, about 6 weeks after the showcase, Marcus received an acceptance letter from the National Youth Music Academy, a competitive summer program in another state. Only 30 pianists his age from across the country had been accepted. The letter praised his technical skill, but especially highlighted the emotional depth and maturity of his playing. Marcus read the letter 3 times before he could believe it was real. His parents cried again, happy tears this time. They told him they were proud beyond words. His father said Marcus's grandmother would have been overjoyed. That night they had a special dinner to celebrate, and afterward Marcus played for them for over an hour, trying out new pieces he was learning, sharing his excitement about the summer program and everything he hoped to learn there. At school the next day, Marcus shared his news with Emma and his friends. They were genuinely thrilled for him, though Emma admitted she would miss practicing with him over the summer. They promised to video chat regularly and to share everything they were learning in their respective programs. Emma had been accepted to a string orchestra workshop that same summer. Jason listened to all this with an expression that was hard to read. Later he pulled Marcus aside and admitted he was jealous, not in a bitter way, but in a way that hurt. He said watching Marcus and Emma pursue their passions with such focus made him realize he had been coasting through life on natural athletic ability and family money. He didn't have anything he cared about the way they cared about music. Marcus thought about this carefully before responding. He told Jason that finding your passion took time, and not everyone found it at 12 years old. His grandmother used to say that life was long and full of possibilities. Just because Jason hadn't found his thing yet didn't mean he never would. And in the meantime, he was learning guitar, which counted for something. Maybe the point wasn't to be the best at something right away, but to find things worth working hard for, worth failing at, and trying again. Jason seemed to take this to heart. He thanked Marcus, looking genuinely grateful. Then he said something that touched Marcus deeply. He said that taking that challenge, making that arrogant statement about the piano, was the best mistake he had ever made. Because if he hadn't, Marcus might never have played. And Jason might never have witnessed something that changed his perspective on everything. In early May, Mrs. Rodriguez organized a small concert featuring her most talented music students. She asked Marcus to headline the event. He agreed immediately, excited rather than terrified this time. The concert was held in the auditorium on a Saturday afternoon, open to the community. Marcus played several pieces, including a new one by a modern composer that Professor Chen had introduced him to. But the most special moment came at the end. Marcus had worked with a local composer to arrange a piece for piano, violin, and guitar. He, Emma, and Jason performed it together. Jason was nervous. His part was relatively simple compared to the others, but he played with heart and managed to keep up. The audience loved it, charmed by the obvious friendship between the 3 performers and the joy they took in making music together. As spring turned to summer and the school year ended, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few months. He had arrived at Riverside Middle School broken and afraid, convinced his dreams of music were dead. He had spent weeks hiding, trying to disappear, running from his past and his pain. Then came Jason's challenge, spoken in arrogance but received as a gift. It had sparked something in Marcus, a tiny flame that grew into a fire. That first afternoon, playing alone in the auditorium, had started a chain reaction that led him here, to friendship and opportunity, and a future bright with possibility. Marcus thought often about the piano, Lisa Chen's piano, the instrument that had carried him through this transformation. There was something almost mystical about it, the way it had called to him, the way it had responded to his touch. He liked to think that Lisa's spirit was somehow present in the instrument, that she approved of him carrying on her legacy of touching hearts through music. His grandmother's presence was in the music too, in every technique she had taught him, every piece of wisdom she had shared. Marcus no longer felt the sharp grief that had consumed him after her death. Instead, he felt gratitude. She had given him a gift that would last his entire life. And now he was using that gift to create beauty and connection. On the last day of school, Marcus stood in the auditorium one more time, saying goodbye to the piano for the summer. He played quietly, just for himself, a simple melody that his grandmother had taught him when he was 5 years old. It was the first real piece he had ever learned, and it still held a special place in his heart. As the notes faded, Marcus heard a sound behind him. He turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez standing in the aisle, tears streaming down her face as usual. She told him she would miss hearing him play every day over the summer. But she knew he would come back transformed again, grown even more, ready to share new music and new joy. Marcus promised her he would practice hard and learn everything he could. He thanked her again for believing in him, for giving him the push he needed, for being there during his journey back to music. She hugged him tightly and told him he had given her something precious too. He had reminded her why she became a music teacher in the first place, to witness moments of transformation, to help young people discover their voices and their courage. As Marcus walked out of the school building for the summer, he passed the trophy case near the main entrance. Among the awards for sports and academics, there was a new plaque. It read, "Spring Showcase Outstanding Musical Performance, awarded to Marcus Chen." Below his name was a quote from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Music is not what we do. It is who we are when we are brave enough to let the world hear our hearts." Marcus smiled, touched by the honor but knowing the real trophy was something invisible. It was the confidence he had rebuilt, the friendships he had formed, the passion he had reclaimed, the future that stretched ahead of him, full of music and possibility. That evening at home, Marcus sat at his grandmother's piano one more time. His parents had finally updated the family photos on the wall, and among them was a beautiful picture from the spring showcase, Marcus at the piano, his face radiant with joy and concentration. Next to it was an old photo of his grandmother at roughly the same age, sitting at a piano in her youth, the same expression on her face. The resemblance was striking. The same focus, the same passion, the same connection to something larger than themselves. Marcus touched the photo of his grandmother gently, then placed his hands on the piano keys. He began to play, filling the house with music, letting the notes carry his gratitude and love to wherever she was. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Birds sang their evening songs. The world continued its eternal rhythm, and in one small house in one small town, a boy played piano, his heart full, his future bright, his grandmother's legacy alive in every note. The invisible boy had become visible. The frightened boy had become brave, and the boy who almost gave up on music had found his way home. All because someone made a challenge, because a special piano waited on a stage, and because sometimes the scariest thing we can do is exactly what we need to do to become who we were always meant to be.